The dust from Natalie Crawford's traveling trunk hit the floorboards of the saloon's back room like a declaration of war, and Vincent Quinn felt his heart drop straight through his boots to the earth below. She had asked him to meet her here, away from prying eyes, and now he understood why. The way she stood with her back to him, shoulders set with determination, told him everything before she even opened her mouth. "I am leaving El Paso," Natalie said, her voice steady despite the tremor he could hear underneath. "Tomorrow morning, first light. There is nothing left for me in Texas anymore." Vincent removed his hat slowly, turning the brim in his calloused hands. They had known each other for 3 years now, ever since her father had hired him to work the ranch just outside of town. What had started as polite conversation over fence repairs had grown into something neither of them had intended. Long talks that stretched past sunset, shared laughter over simple things, the kind of friendship that made his chest ache whenever he rode back to the bunkhouse alone. "Where are you headed?" he asked, though part of him did not want to know. Anywhere would be too far. "San Francisco. My aunt wrote me. She needs help with her dress shop, and after Father died, after we lost the ranch to the bank." She finally turned to face him, and Vincent saw the exhaustion in her brown eyes. At 24, Natalie should not have looked so worn down by the world. "I cannot stay here and watch someone else live in my childhood home. I cannot pour coffee for another year at the saloon and pretend I am building towards something." Vincent was 26 and had been a drifter most of his adult life. He had never put down roots anywhere, never saw the point when the land did not belong to him, and never would. But these past 3 years in El Paso had been different. He had started to imagine what it might be like to have something of his own. A small spread, maybe. A woman who looked at him the way Natalie sometimes did when she thought he was not paying attention. "Then I am coming with you," he heard himself say. "Wherever that may be." Natalie blinked, her lips parting in surprise. "Vincent, you cannot just—" "I can," he interrupted, taking a step closer. "I've got nothing holding me here except a job I can find anywhere and a rented room I will not miss. You think I am going to let you travel all the way to California alone? It is 1876, Natalie, not some fairy tale. The route west is dangerous even now." "I am not your responsibility," she said, but her voice had softened. "No," Vincent agreed, holding her gaze. "But you are my friend. And maybe, if I am being honest, you have been more than that for a while now. I just never said it because you had the ranch to worry about, and your father's illness, and 100 other things that seemed more important than what I felt." The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty window, illuminating the space between them. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself, and Vincent could see her fighting some internal battle. When she spoke again, her words came out barely above a whisper. "I cannot ask you to uproot your entire life for me. You are not asking. I am telling you." Vincent put his hat back on and gave her a small smile. "I have been saving my wages for 5 years now, waiting for a reason to use them. Maybe you are it. Maybe San Francisco is where I am supposed to end up. Either way, I am not letting you go alone." Natalie pressed her hand to her mouth, and for a moment Vincent thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed, a sound of pure disbelief mixed with something that might have been relief. "You are serious. As serious as I have ever been about anything." She moved toward him then, closing the distance until she was near enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. "What if I fail? What if my aunt's business cannot support both of us? What if San Francisco is just another place where I cannot make things work?" Vincent reached out and took her hand, his rough fingers curling around hers. "Then we will figure it out together. That is what people do when they care about each other, Natalie. They do not give up just because the path forward is not clear." Her fingers tightened around his, and when she looked up at him, Vincent saw something shift in her expression. It was like watching someone open a window they had kept locked for too long, finally letting in fresh air. "All right," she said. "All right, Vincent Quinn, if you are fool enough to follow me across half the country, then I suppose I am fool enough to let you." They left El Paso the next morning as planned, but now there were 2 horses instead of 1, 2 sets of saddlebags loaded with everything they owned. Natalie had sold most of her possessions to pay off her father's remaining debts, keeping only what she could carry. Vincent had even less. His whole life fit into 2 bags and a bedroll. The journey to California would take them weeks, maybe longer depending on the route and how many towns they stopped in along the way. Vincent had mapped it out the night before, sitting in his rented room by candlelight, tracing possible paths with his finger. They would head west through New Mexico territory, then north to avoid the worst of the desert before cutting across to California. It was not the fastest route, but it was safer for just the 2 of them. As El Paso disappeared behind them in a cloud of dust and morning heat, Vincent glanced over at Natalie. She sat straight in her saddle, eyes fixed on the horizon, and he wondered what she was thinking. Was she mourning what she was leaving behind? Or was she, like him, feeling something that resembled hope for the first time in a long while? "Thank you," she said suddenly, not looking at him, "for doing this. I know I acted like I did not need help, but the truth is I was terrified. The idea of making this trip alone, of showing up in a city where I barely know anyone." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Thank you for being the kind of man who would do something like this." Vincent adjusted his reins, uncomfortable with the gratitude but warmed by it all the same. "You would do the same for me." "I would," she agreed, and this time she did look at him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Though I hope you never have to test that theory. 1 cross-country journey is probably enough for both of us." They made good time that first day, covering nearly 30 miles before stopping to make camp as the sun began its descent. Vincent found a spot with some cover, a cluster of rocks that would protect them from the wind and provide a decent vantage point in case anyone approached. He had been a cowboy long enough to know that caution was not paranoia, just common sense. While he tended to the horses, Natalie gathered kindling for a fire. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other well. When the fire was crackling and coffee was heating in the battered pot Vincent had packed, they finally sat down across from each other. "Tell me about your aunt," Vincent said, accepting the piece of jerky Natalie offered him. "What is she like?" Natalie considered the question, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "I have not seen her since I was 12, so I am not entirely sure, but I remember her being kind. Sharp-witted. She left Texas because she wanted more than what was available to her here. My father always said she was too ambitious for her own good, but I think he secretly admired her for it." "Ambitious is not a bad thing," Vincent said. "No," Natalie agreed. "Though it can be lonely, I think. Her letters always sounded a little sad even when she was writing about her successes. Like she had gotten what she wanted but lost something else in the process." Vincent poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting upward into the darkening sky. "Maybe she just needed the right person by her side. Sometimes the dream is not the problem, it is trying to do it all alone." Natalie met his eyes across the flames, and something passed between them that did not need words. The air felt charged somehow, full of things unsaid but understood. Vincent wanted to move around the fire, to sit beside her, and take her hand the way he had yesterday in the saloon. But he held back, unsure if she was ready for that yet. This trip would give them time. There was no need to rush. "What about you?" Natalie asked, breaking the moment. "What do you want, Vincent? You have spent all this time helping me figure out my next step, but what is yours? It was a fair question, and one Vincent had been asking himself for years. Honestly, I want what most men want, I suppose. A place to call my own. Work that means something. A reason to wake up in the morning that is not just about surviving until the next day. He paused, then added more quietly, someone to share it with. Natalie looked down at her hands, but not before Vincent caught the flush rising in her cheeks. That does not sound like too much to ask. Maybe not, but it has felt that way sometimes. They finished their meal in silence, and when Natalie announced she was going to sleep, Vincent stood and offered to take first watch. She did not argue, just gathered her bedroll and settled down on the far side of the fire. Vincent watched her for a moment, the way the firelight played across her features, before turning his attention to the darkness beyond their small camp. The night was full of sounds. Coyotes in the distance, the occasional rustle of some small creature moving through the brush, the soft whicker of the horses. Vincent let his mind wander as he kept watch, thinking about the decision he had made. It had been impulsive, the kind of thing he usually avoided. But it had also felt right in a way few things ever had. He had meant what he said to Natalie. She was more than just a friend, though he had been too cautious to admit it before. Watching her struggle after her father's death, seeing her lose the ranch piece by piece to debt and misfortune, it had torn him apart. He had wanted to help, but had not known how. This journey, following her to California, maybe it was his chance to finally be there for her the way he wanted to be. When his watch ended, Vincent woke Natalie gently and took her place by the fire. Sleep came easier than he expected, pulling him down into dreams of cities he had never seen and a future that felt suddenly, unexpectedly possible. They fell into a rhythm over the next several days. Rise before dawn, ride until midday when the heat became oppressive, rest in whatever shade they could find, then ride again until evening. The landscape changed gradually around them, the flatlands of West Texas giving way to rockier terrain as they crossed into New Mexico territory. Vincent had been through this area before, but seeing it with Natalie beside him made it feel new somehow. They talked as they rode, conversations that ranged from the mundane to the profound. Natalie told him about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was 8, about the books she had read in secret because her father thought too much learning made women difficult. Vincent shared his own history, the parts of it he usually kept to himself. The father who had drunk himself to death, the mother who had remarried and made it clear her new husband did not want a teenage stepson around. The years he had spent drifting, taking work where he could find it, never quite fitting anywhere. You think people can really start over? Natalie asked one afternoon as they watered the horses at a small creek. Just leave everything behind and become someone new? Vincent considered the question. I think people can move forward. I am not sure about becoming someone new. We carry our past with us whether we want to or not. But maybe that is all right. Maybe the point is not to forget where we came from but to build something better on top of it. Natalie smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. I like that answer. Good, Vincent said, returning her smile. Because I just made it up and was not sure if it actually made sense. She laughed, and the sound made something warm unfurl in Vincent's chest. He loved making her laugh, loved the way it transformed her whole face. In El Paso, she had been so burdened by worry and grief that moments of joy had been rare. Seeing her start to relax, to let go of some of that weight, felt like watching spring arrive after a brutal winter. That night, they camped near the remains of an old adobe structure, walls half crumbled but still providing some shelter from the wind. As they sat by the fire eating beans and hardtack, Natalie suddenly said, I am glad you came with me. Vincent looked up from his meal. Yeah, yeah. She set her plate aside and drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. I kept telling myself I could do this alone because I have had to do so many things alone these past 2 years. But the truth is, it is better with you here. Not just because you are good at practical things like finding water and keeping watch, but because you make me feel less alone in general. Vincent's throat tightened with emotion. He set down his own plate and moved around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You are not alone, Natalie. Not anymore. Whatever happens in San Francisco, whatever we find when we get there, we will face it together. She turned her head to look at him, and in the flickering firelight her eyes were shining. Do you really mean that? Because once we get there, once we start building a life, it will not be easy to undo. I do not want you to feel trapped by a decision you made in a moment of chivalry. It was not chivalry, Vincent said firmly. Or at least not just that. Natalie, I have been half in love with you since the day you told me off for fixing your fence wrong and then showed me the proper way to do it. You were covered in dust, mad as a hornet, and completely beautiful. I just never thought I had the right to say anything. Natalie's breath caught, and for a long moment she just stared at him. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. You really are a fool, Vincent Quinn. I know, he said softly. Because I have felt the same way for at least 2 years, and we could have been doing this instead of dancing around each other like idiots. Before Vincent could respond, Natalie leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But when Vincent brought his free hand up to cup her cheek and kissed her back, it deepened into something real and urgent and full of all the feelings they had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Natalie rested her forehead against his. Well, she said a little breathlessly, that was worth the wait. Vincent laughed, the sound rough and full of joy. We are definitely not dancing around each other anymore. No, Natalie agreed, pulling back just enough to look at him properly. No more dancing. From now on, we are honest about what we want. And what do you want? Vincent asked, though he thought he might already know the answer. You, she said simply. This. A chance to build something real together. I want to get to San Francisco and make my aunt's dress shop the best in the city. I want to walk down streets I have never seen before and know that you will be there beside me. I want to stop being afraid of hoping for good things. Vincent kissed her again, softer this time, a promise sealed between them. Then that is what we will do. They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing and planning, the fire burning low as the stars wheeled overhead. When they finally settled into their bedrolls, they pushed them close together, and Vincent fell asleep with Natalie's hand clasped in his, feeling more content than he had in his entire life. The journey continued, and with this new understanding between them, everything felt different. They still rode during the day and made camp at night, but now there were stolen kisses when they stopped to rest, hands that found excuses to touch, smiles exchanged across the campfire that held entire conversations. Vincent had never been in love before, not really, but he recognized it now. It was in the way his heart lifted every time Natalie laughed, the way he thought about her future as automatically as he thought about his own, the way he would have done anything, faced anything, to keep her safe. About 2 weeks into their journey, they reached a small town called Socorro in New Mexico territory. It was not much more than a handful of buildings clustered around a dusty main street, but it had a general store and a place they could sleep indoors for a night. Vincent paid for a room at the boarding house while Natalie restocked their supplies, and when she rejoined him, she was carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper. What is that? Vincent asked, curious. Natalie's cheeks flushed pink. Fabric. I saw it in the store and could not resist. It is beautiful cotton, deep blue with little flowers. I thought when we get to San Francisco I could make something nice. A dress for meeting my aunt properly, maybe. Vincent smiled, loving the way her eyes lit up when she talked about sewing. That sounds perfect. You will look beautiful in it. You have not even seen it yet, she protested, but she was smiling. Does not matter. You would look beautiful in anything. They spent the evening walking around Socorro, such as it was. The town was quiet, most people already settled in for the night. They found a small cantina still open and shared a meal of enchiladas and rice, the spices a welcome change from their trail food. As they ate, an old man with a guitar began playing in the corner, soft melodies that spoke of love and loss and the long roads that connected them. "Dance with me," Vincent said suddenly, standing and offering Natalie his hand. She looked around the nearly empty cantina, then back at him. "Here. Why not? No one is watching, and that music is too good to waste." Natalie laughed and took his hand, letting him pull her up and into his arms. They swayed together to the old man's music, not really following any particular steps, just moving together in a way that felt natural. Vincent was not a good dancer, had never learned properly, but with Natalie in his arms it did not seem to matter. "This is nice," she murmured, her head resting against his chest. "Being able to just exist somewhere without worrying about who is watching or what they might think." "That is one good thing about leaving home," Vincent said. "Nobody out here knows us or cares about our business. We can be whoever we want to be." Natalie pulled back slightly to look up at him, her expression serious. "I want to be yours, Vincent. Properly, I mean. When we get to San Francisco, if things work out the way we hope, I want us to get married." Vincent's heart skipped a beat. "Are you proposing to me, Natalie Crawford?" "Maybe I am," she said, a challenge in her eyes. "Is that all right? Or are you one of those traditional men who needs to do the asking?" "I am a man who does not care who asks as long as the answer is yes," Vincent said, grinning. "So yes, Natalie. When we get to San Francisco, when we have gotten ourselves settled and figured out how we are going to make this work, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." She kissed him right there in the middle of the cantina. And the old man with the guitar played a little louder, a little more joyfully, as if blessing them with his music. They stayed in Socorro for 2 days, resting the horses and themselves before continuing west. When they finally left, Vincent felt refreshed and more determined than ever to get them safely to California. The landscape grew more challenging as they traveled deeper into New Mexico territory, the terrain rockier, and the water sources fewer and farther between. But they managed, relying on Vincent's experience and the advice of other travelers they occasionally encountered. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into their journey, they crested a rise and found themselves looking down at a small ranch nestled in a valley. Smoke rose from the chimney, and they could see horses in a corral beside the barn. "Think they would let us fill our canteens?" Natalie asked, squinting against the sun. "Only one way to find out," Vincent said, guiding his horse down the slope. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but not raised. He was older, probably in his 50s, with sun-weathered skin and sharp eyes that took in everything about them in a single glance. "Help you folks," he called out. Vincent raised a hand in greeting. "We are passing through, heading to California, hoping you might spare some water for us and our horses." The man studied them for a moment longer, then lowered the rifle. "Reckon I can do that. Come on in, but keep your hands where I can see them." They dismounted and followed the man to a well beside the house. A woman emerged as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was younger than the man, maybe in her 40s, with kind eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a bun. "Travelers, Martha," the man said. "Heading west. Said they need water." Martha looked them over, her gaze lingering on Natalie's dusty dress and tired face. "You look like you could use more than water. When was the last time you two had a proper meal?" "A few days back," Natalie admitted. "We have been making do with what we can cook over a fire." Martha shook her head. "Come inside. I have got stew on and there is plenty. You can tell us where you are headed and why while we eat." The man, who introduced himself as Samuel Garrett, seemed less enthusiastic about the invitation, but did not argue with his wife. They all went inside, and true to her word, Martha had a pot of venison stew simmering over the fire. She ladled generous portions into bowls and set them down at the rough-hewn table. As they ate, Vincent and Natalie explained their situation, leaving out some of the more personal details, but giving the general outline of their journey. Samuel and Martha listened, occasionally asking questions, and by the time the meal was finished, the older couple seemed to have warmed to them. "California is a long way from Texas," Samuel said, leaning back in his chair. "Dangerous trip for just the two of you. You run into any trouble so far?" "Nothing we could not handle," Vincent said. "We have been careful, staying off the main roads when we can, avoiding places that look like trouble." Samuel nodded approvingly. "Smart. Still, you got a long way to go yet. The desert crossing is not something to take lightly, even with two of you." "We will manage," Natalie said quietly. "We do not have much choice." Martha reached across the table and patted Natalie's hand. "You have got more choice than you think, dear. You could stay here for a few days, rest up properly before continuing. Samuel and I do not get many visitors, and I would enjoy the company." Vincent and Natalie exchanged glances, a whole conversation happening silently between them. The offer was tempting. They were both tired, and the horses could use more rest than a single night would provide. But Vincent was also wary of imposing on strangers, no matter how kind they seemed. "We would not want to be a burden," Natalie said carefully. "No burden," Martha insisted. "Samuel could use another pair of hands around here anyway. We have been meaning to fix the barn roof before winter, but it is too much for one man. If your young man is willing to help with that, we would be more than happy to have you." Vincent met Samuel's eyes and saw the older man give a small nod of agreement. "That seems fair," Vincent said. "We could stay a few days, help out where we can if you are sure." "We are sure," Martha said firmly, and that was that. They ended up staying at the Garrett Ranch for 5 days, and it turned out to be exactly what they needed. Vincent worked alongside Samuel, repairing the barn roof and fixing a broken section of fence, while Natalie helped Martha with cooking, laundry, and the hundreds of small tasks that kept a ranch running. In the evenings, they all ate together, sharing stories and laughter. It was during these evenings that Vincent learned more about Samuel and Martha's life. They had no children of their own, something Martha spoke about with quiet sadness but acceptance. They had built this ranch together from nothing, worked side by side for 23 years, and created a life that might not have been what they originally dreamed, but was theirs nonetheless. "The important thing is having someone who stands beside you," Samuel said one night as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Land can be bought and sold, money comes and goes, but a partner who really sees you and chooses you anyway, that is worth more than all the gold in California." Vincent glanced at Natalie, who was sitting beside him, and found her already looking at him. He took her hand, no longer caring who saw or what they thought, and squeezed gently. She squeezed back, and in that moment, Vincent understood what Samuel meant. Whatever happened in San Francisco, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. That made all the difference when it was time to leave. Martha packed them enough food for a week, refusing to accept any payment. Samuel pulled Vincent aside and gave him directions to a reliable water source about 2 days ahead, along with advice about which trails to take and which to avoid. "You take care of that girl," Samuel said quietly. "She is tougher than she looks, but everyone needs someone watching their back." "I will," Vincent promised. "Thank you, Samuel, for everything." The older man nodded and held out his hand. Vincent shook it firmly, then mounted his horse. Natalie hugged Martha goodbye, and Vincent saw tears in both women's eyes. Then they were riding away, waving until the ranch disappeared behind them. "That was good," Natalie said after a while. "Seeing what a real partnership looks like, the way they work together, support each other. That is what I want for us." "Me too," Vincent agreed. "And that is what we will have. I promise." The journey continued through New Mexico territory and into Arizona territory. The landscape became more dramatically beautiful and more harsh at the same time. Red rock formations towered around them, and the sky seemed bigger somehow, endless and impossibly blue. Water was scarcer here, and they had to be more careful about rationing what they had. One evening, about a month into their journey, they made camp in the shadow of a massive rock formation. The sun was setting, painting the rocks in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. Natalie stood staring at it, her face full of wonder. "I have never seen anything like this," she said softly. "In Texas, everything was so flat, but it is like God was showing off when he made this place." Vincent came to stand beside her, equally awed. "Makes you feel pretty small, does not it? In a good way, though." Natalie leaned against him, and Vincent wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Like whatever problems we have, the world is big enough to hold solutions too." They stood there until the last light faded from the sky, then set about making camp. Vincent had just gotten the fire started when he heard the sound of approaching horses. He was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Beside him, Natalie had gone still, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond their firelight. 3 riders emerged from the shadows, their faces hard and their intentions unclear. Vincent recognized the look of men who made their living taking from others, whether through intimidation or force. "Well now," the lead rider said, a man with a scar running down his left cheek. "What do we have here? A couple of travelers all alone in the wilderness. That does not seem very safe." "We are not looking for trouble," Vincent said evenly, his hand still resting on his gun. "We are just passing through." The scarred man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course you are. But passing through takes resources, does not it? Food, water, maybe a little coin to smooth the way. We could help you with that for a price." "We can manage on our own," Vincent said. One of the other riders, a younger man with mean eyes, laughed. "I do not think you understand. We are not asking." Things happened fast after that. The mean-eyed rider started to dismount, and Vincent drew his revolver in one smooth motion. "I would stay on that horse if I were you." The 3 men froze, reassessing the situation. Vincent might have been outnumbered, but he had his gun drawn and looked like he knew how to use it. More importantly, he had positioned himself between them and Natalie, making it clear he would fight if necessary. "Now listen," Vincent said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "We do not want trouble, but we will not be robbed either. You men can ride on and find easier prey, or we can see how this plays out. But I am telling you right now, I am a fair shot, and I will take at least one of you down before this is over. Maybe 2. Is whatever we have really worth dying for?" The scarred man's eyes narrowed, calculating. The tension stretched out, thick enough to cut, and Vincent could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, finally, the leader pulled his reins to the side. "You are not worth the trouble," he said, though his tone suggested he was trying to save face. "Come on, boys. There are easier pickings down the trail." They rode off into the darkness, and Vincent did not lower his gun until he could no longer hear their horses. When he finally holstered it, his hand was shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Natalie was beside him in an instant, her hands on his arms. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. Yeah, I am fine." "Are you?" She nodded, then threw her arms around him, holding him tight. Vincent hugged her back, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling profoundly grateful that he had been able to defuse the situation without violence. "That was terrifying," Natalie said against his chest. "I thought they were going to, I know. But they did not. We are okay." Vincent pulled back to look at her face. "Maybe we should not camp out in the open like this for a while. Find places with more cover where we are harder to spot." Natalie agreed, and from then on, they were more careful about where they stopped. The encounter had shaken them both, a reminder that the West was still wild despite the railroads and telegraph lines that were slowly connecting it to the rest of the world. But it also reinforced something Vincent already knew. He would do anything to keep Natalie safe, face any danger, take any risk. They crossed into California territory about 6 weeks after leaving El Paso. The border was not marked by anything official, just a change in the landscape and the knowledge that they were finally in the same territory as their destination. Natalie cried when Vincent told her, tears of relief and exhaustion and hope all mixed together. "We are almost there," she kept saying. "We are really almost there." They still had weeks of travel ahead of them, winding north through California towards San Francisco, but it felt different now. They were in the home stretch, close enough to taste the future they had been riding toward. The terrain changed again, becoming greener as they moved north, with massive trees that dwarfed anything in Texas. The air smelled different here, carrying hints of salt from the distant ocean. They stopped in small towns along the way, picking up work where they could to replenish their funds. Vincent hired himself out for a few days at a ranch in the San Joaquin Valley, while Natalie took in mending for a boarding house. The work was familiar and grounding, a reminder that no matter where they went, they both had skills that could sustain them. It was in one of these small towns, a place called Stockton, that something happened which changed everything. They were in the general store, buying supplies for the last leg of their journey, when Natalie suddenly grabbed Vincent's arm. "That fabric," she said, pointing to a bolt of deep green silk on the shelf. "Vincent, that is expensive material, the kind my aunt writes about using in her shop. If they are carrying it here in a small town like this, imagine what must be available in San Francisco." Vincent saw the excitement in her eyes and felt his own hope rise in response. "You are going to do well there, Natalie. I know you are." The shopkeeper, an older Chinese man with kind eyes, had been listening. "You are going to San Francisco?" he asked. Natalie nodded. "My aunt owns a dress shop there. I am going to work with her." The shopkeeper smiled. "San Francisco is a good city for those who work hard. My son lives there. He writes that there is opportunity for everyone, not like some places." He paused, then added, "Your aunt is lucky to have someone coming to help her. Good family is everything." They talked with the shopkeeper for a while longer, and he told them about his own journey from China 30 years earlier, the backbreaking work on the railroads, the discrimination he had faced, and the life he had eventually built despite it all. His story was both heartbreaking and inspiring, a reminder that everyone traveling west carried their own dreams and struggles. When they finally left Stockton, Vincent felt more determined than ever. They were going to make this work. They had to. 3 days outside of San Francisco, they stopped at a creek to wash up. They were both filthy from weeks of travel, their clothes stiff with dust and sweat. While the horses drank, Natalie unpacked the blue fabric she had bought in Socorro, the one she planned to make into a dress. "I want to look presentable when we arrive," she said, shaking out the material. "Not like something the cat dragged in." "You look beautiful no matter what," Vincent said, but he understood. This was about dignity, about showing her aunt that she had not made a mistake in inviting Natalie West. That night, Natalie sat by the fire and began cutting the fabric, working by firelight with a confidence that came from years of practice. Vincent watched her, marveling at the way her hands moved, sure and steady despite the poor lighting. She caught him staring and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "You, us, how lucky I am." Vincent reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I meant what I said back in El Paso, Natalie. Wherever you go, I go, not because I have to, but because I cannot imagine being anywhere else." She set down her sewing and moved around the fire to sit beside him, curling into his side. "When we get to San Francisco, after we have gotten settled and figured out our situation, I want to get married right away. I do not want to wait. We have already waited long enough." "Agreed," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head. "No more waiting. We start our real life together as soon as possible." They spent the next 2 days finishing the final stretch of their journey. The landscape became more populated as they got closer to the city, with farms and small settlements appearing more frequently. They could smell the ocean now, sharp and briny, carried on the wind. Neither of them had ever seen the ocean, and the anticipation was almost overwhelming. On their final morning of travel, they woke before dawn and packed up camp quickly, both too excited to sleep any longer. As the sun rose, they topped a hill, and there it was. San Francisco spread out before them, the bay glittering in the morning light, buildings packed together in a way that seemed impossible to their Texas-raised eyes. And beyond it all, stretching to the horizon, was the Pacific Ocean. Natalie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Vincent, look at it, just look." Vincent was looking, but not at the city. He was watching Natalie's face, the wonder and joy written across it, and feeling his own heart swell with emotion. They had made it. Against all odds, through danger and doubt and exhaustion, they had actually made it. "Ready?" he asked, offering her his hand. She took it, her fingers warm and sure in his. "Ready." They rode down into San Francisco side by side. Two travelers carrying everything they owned and more hope than they probably should have allowed themselves. The city was overwhelming, loud and crowded, and full of sights and sounds neither of them had ever experienced. Horse-drawn carriages clattered over cobblestone streets. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high, blocking out the sky. People were everywhere, from every corner of the world it seemed, speaking in languages Vincent could not identify. Natalie had her aunt's address memorized, but finding it in the chaos of the city was another matter entirely. They stopped several times to ask for directions, slowly making their way through neighborhoods that ranged from elegant to rough. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of searching, they found the street they were looking for. The dress shop was on the ground floor of a narrow building, with living quarters above it. The windows displayed beautiful dresses on mannequins, the kind of elegant clothing that wealthy women wore to parties and social events. Above the door, a sign read "Catherine's Fine Dresses" in gold lettering. Natalie dismounted slowly, staring at the shop as if she could not quite believe it was real. Vincent tied off both horses and came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "This is it," she whispered. "This is it," he agreed. "You ready to meet your aunt?" Natalie straightened her shoulders, brushed dust from her new blue dress that she had insisted on changing into that morning, and nodded. "I am ready." They walked to the door together, and Natalie pushed it open. A small bell chimed, announcing their arrival. The shop's interior was beautiful, with bolts of fabric lining the walls and several elegant dresses in various stages of completion on dress forms. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her late 40s, with brown hair liberally streaked with gray and sharp eyes that were so similar to Natalie's that Vincent would have known she was family even without introduction. Those eyes widened when she saw Natalie. "My God," the woman said softly. "Natalie, is that really you?" "Hello, Aunt Catherine," Natalie said, and her voice wavered just slightly. "I hope we are not arriving at a bad time." Catherine crossed the shop in 3 quick strides and pulled Natalie into a fierce hug. "Bad time? Child, I have been watching for you for weeks." I was starting to worry something had happened. She pulled back, holding Natalie at arm's length and looking her over carefully. "You look exhausted and thin, but you are here. That is what matters." Then Catherine's gaze shifted to Vincent, standing quietly near the door. "And who is this?" "This is Vincent Quinn," Natalie said, reaching out to pull him forward. Well, it is a long story, but he is the reason I made it here safely. He is the reason I made it here at all, really. Vincent, this is my aunt, Natalie Crawford." Vincent removed his hat and offered his hand. "Pleased to meet you, madam. Natalie has told me a lot about you." Catherine shook his hand firmly, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Has she now? Well, any friend of Natalie's is welcome here. You both look like you need a proper meal and a real bed. Come upstairs and we will get you settled. Then you can tell me this long story of yours." The living quarters above the shop were small but comfortable, decorated with the kind of careful attention that spoke of someone who understood beauty and took pride in her surroundings. Catherine ushered them to a table and immediately set about preparing food, waving away Natalie's offers to help. "You just sit and rest," she said firmly. "There will be plenty of time for work later. For now, I want to hear everything." So they told her, trading off parts of the story as they ate the hot meal Catherine set before them. They told her about the ranch being sold, about Natalie's decision to come west, about Vincent's impulsive declaration that he was coming with her. They described the journey, glossing over the more dangerous parts but giving her enough detail that she understood what they had faced. And finally, perhaps inevitably, they told her that they were in love and planned to be married. Catherine listened to all of it, her expression shifting from concern to surprise to something that might have been approval. When they finished, she sat back in her chair and regarded them both steadily. "That is quite a story," she said finally. "And Vincent, you gave up your job and your life in Texas to travel across the country with my niece. No promises made, no guarantee of what you would find here." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Yes, madam, I did." "Why?" It was the same question Natalie had asked him back in El Paso, and his answer was essentially the same. "Because she needed someone by her side, and I wanted to be that someone. Because I had been looking for a reason to believe in something my whole life, and she gave me one. Because I love her." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, and Vincent could not tell what she was thinking. Then she smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "Well, I suppose I cannot argue with that. Lord knows I have done foolish things for love in my time. At least your foolishness brought you here safely." Relief flooded through Vincent, and he saw Natalie relax beside him. Catherine stood and began clearing the dishes, her movements brisk and efficient. "Here is what we are going to do," she said. "Natalie, you will work with me in the shop, learning the business and helping with commissions." "Vincent, I assume you need work as well." "Yes, madam," Vincent said. "I will take anything honest. Can you do general labor?" Lifting, carrying, that sort of thing, of course. Catherine nodded. Good, I have a friend who runs a shipping warehouse down by the docks. They are always looking for reliable workers. I will write you a letter of introduction. The pay is decent, and it is honest work. Between what you make there and what Natalie and I earn from the shop, you two should be able to afford a small place of your own eventually. She paused, then added, For now, you can stay here. I have a spare room, nothing fancy, but it is clean and dry. I do not hold with unmarried couples sharing quarters under my roof. So, Vincent, you will sleep on the sofa in the sitting room until you two make things official. That is more than fair, Vincent said, grateful beyond words. Thank you, Catherine, truly. Do not thank me yet, Catherine said, but she was smiling. Wait until you have been working for a few months and realize how hard life in the city can be. Thank me then if you still want to. They settled into a routine surprisingly quickly. Vincent started work at the warehouse the very next day, rising before dawn to make the long walk to the docks. The work was physically demanding, loading and unloading cargo ships that came in from all over the world, but he did not mind. It felt good to be working toward something concrete, earning money that he and Natalie could save toward their future. Natalie thrived in the dress shop. She had a natural talent for design and an eye for detail that Catherine recognized and nurtured. Within weeks, she was taking on simple commissions of her own, altering dresses for customers or creating pieces from Catherine's designs. The customers loved her, charmed by her warm demeanor and impressed by her skill. In the evenings, they would all eat dinner together, sharing stories from their days. Catherine was a wonderful storyteller, full of tales about the city and its inhabitants, about the dramatic changes she had witnessed over her years there. She told them about the gold rush days, about the fire that had devastated the city in 1851, about the influx of people from every nation seeking their fortune. San Francisco is not like other places, she said one night. Here, who you were before matters less than who you are now. Oh, there is still prejudice and cruelty, do not misunderstand me, but there is also opportunity for those brave enough to reach for it. That is why I love this city, for all its flaws. Vincent and Natalie would linger after Catherine went to bed, stealing a few precious moments together before Vincent retired to the sofa. They would sit close, hands intertwined, talking in low voices about their plans. They wanted to marry soon, but there were practical considerations. They needed to save enough money for a proper start, to have something set aside in case of emergency. I do not want a big wedding, Natalie said one night. Just something simple. You, me, Aunt Catherine, and whoever we need to make it legal. I do not care about fancy dresses or big celebrations. I just want to be your wife. I want that too, Vincent said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles. Maybe in a few months, when we have saved a little more, spring would be nice. Spring sounds perfect, Natalie agreed, and they sat there imagining it, their simple wedding and the life that would follow. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Vincent felt more settled in San Francisco. He made friends at the warehouse, men from all over who had come seeking the same things he and Natalie had. Opportunity, a fresh start, a chance at something better. He learned the rhythms of the city, the best places to buy bread, which streets to avoid after dark, where to find a decent drink when he wanted one. Natalie bloomed in this new environment. The grief and worry that had weighed her down in El Paso gradually lifted, replaced by a confidence and joy that made Vincent's heart sing every time he saw it. She laughed more easily, dreamed more boldly, and every day Vincent fell more in love with her. In December, about 4 months after their arrival, Vincent and Natalie took a walk along the bay. It was a rare, clear day, the fog that usually shrouded the city having lifted to reveal brilliant blue sky. They walked hand in hand, enjoying the feel of the sun on their faces and the sight of ships moving in and out of the harbor. "I have been thinking," Vincent said as they paused to watch a particularly large clipper ship navigate toward the docks. "About what we talked about. Getting married in the spring." "And?" Natalie asked, turning to face him. "I do not want to wait that long." Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but real gold nonetheless. "I have been saving every penny I could spare, and I finally have enough. Natalie Crawford, will you marry me? Not in 3 months, not next spring, but as soon as we can arrange it." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling the brightest smile Vincent had ever seen. "Yes," she said, her voice catching on the word. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her there on the waterfront with half the city walking by, and neither of them cared who saw or what anyone thought. They were together, they were in love, and they were going to be married. They told Catherine that evening, and she cried and hugged them both and immediately started making plans. The wedding was set for 2 weeks later, giving them just enough time to arrange for a minister and a few other necessities. Catherine insisted on making Natalie's wedding dress herself, a labor of love that she worked on every evening after the shop closed. The dress was beautiful, simple but elegant, made from ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. When Natalie tried it on the day before the wedding, Vincent caught a glimpse of her through the shop window and had to stop and catch his breath. She looked like something out of a dream, beautiful and radiant, and his. The wedding took place at a small church Catherine attended, with just a handful of people present. Catherine was there, of course, along with a few of her friends from the neighborhood and a couple of Vincent's co-workers from the warehouse. The minister was an older man with a kind smile who seemed genuinely happy to be uniting them. Vincent stood at the altar in his best shirt and pants, heart pounding as he waited for Natalie to appear. When she did, walking down the short aisle on Catherine's arm, time seemed to slow. She was smiling at him, her eyes locked on his, and in that moment, Vincent knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every mile traveled, every risk taken had been worth it for this. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came, and Vincent slipped a second ring onto Natalie's finger, a matching band to the engagement ring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Vincent he could kiss his bride, Vincent did so with all the love and joy and relief that had been building in his chest for months. They were married. After everything, they were finally, officially married. The small group retired to a nearby restaurant for a celebratory meal. Catherine gave a toast that had them all laughing and crying at the same time, talking about her brave niece and the cowboy who had loved her enough to follow her across the country. Vincent's boss from the warehouse, a gruff man named Tom, surprised them with a gift of 2 weeks' wages, telling Vincent he had earned it and then some. But the best part was simply sitting beside Natalie, now his wife, and realizing that this was just the beginning. They had the rest of their lives ahead of them, years and decades to build the future they both wanted. That night, they moved Vincent's few belongings from the sofa to the spare room, which was now officially theirs to share. Catherine had discreetly made herself scarce, giving them privacy on their wedding night. They lay together in the narrow bed, wrapped in each other's arms, talking in whispers. "We did it," Natalie said softly. "We really did it. All those miles, all those risks, and we made it to the other side." "We did," Vincent agreed, running his fingers through her hair. "And now we get to do the rest of it together, building a life, making a home, all of it." "You have any regrets?" she asked. "About leaving Texas, about giving up whatever life you might have had there?" Vincent considered the question seriously, then shook his head. "No, not even for a second. My life started the day you told me you were leaving and I decided to follow you. Everything before that was just waiting." Natalie kissed him, soft and slow, and they held each other as the sounds of the city filtered in through the window. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's bell rang out over the water. Closer, they could hear the rumble of cart wheels on cobblestones, the bark of a dog, the laughter of people heading home from the saloons. These were the sounds of their new life, of the city they would make their own. In the morning, they returned to their normal routines, but everything felt different now. Vincent went to the warehouse as usual, but now he was working not just for himself but for his wife, for their shared future. Natalie went down to the shop with Catherine, but now she wore her wedding rings proudly, symbols of the love and commitment that had brought her to this moment. The months that followed were busy and happy. Vincent got a promotion at the warehouse, becoming a foreman, which came with better pay and more responsibility. Natalie's skills as a seamstress grew, and she started taking on more complex commissions. They saved aggressively, every spare penny going into a tin box they kept hidden in their room. By the following spring, they had saved enough to start looking for a place of their own. Catherine encouraged them, saying she had loved having them there but understood they needed their own space. They found a small apartment not far from the shop, just 2 rooms but clean and with good light. It was not much, but it was theirs. Moving into their own place felt like another beginning. They had so little furniture that the rooms echoed, but they did not care. Natalie hung curtains she made herself. Vincent built a small table from scrap lumber he got from the warehouse. Slowly, they filled the empty spaces and turned the apartment into a home. One evening, about 1.5 years after their arrival in San Francisco, they sat together at their small table eating dinner. Natalie had been quiet all day, and Vincent had noticed but not pushed, waiting for her to tell him what was on her mind when she was ready. Finally, she set down her fork and reached across the table to take his hand. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made Vincent's stomach clench with worry. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No," Natalie said quickly. "Nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so, I hope not." She took a deep breath. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Vincent just stared at her, his mind trying to process the information. Then joy, pure and overwhelming, crashed over him like a wave. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. Natalie nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "Are you happy?" "I know we did not plan this. We never even really talked about children, and maybe it is too soon," but Vincent was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and into his arms. "Happy, Natalie. I am more than happy. I do not even have words for what I am." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We are going to have a baby. A family." They held each other in their tiny apartment, both crying and laughing at the same time. This was something they had not anticipated, had not specifically planned for, but it felt right. It felt like the next chapter of the story they were writing together. The pregnancy was not easy. Natalie suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and there were days when she could barely keep anything down. Vincent tried to help as much as he could, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, holding her hair when she was sick, sitting with her when she was too exhausted to move. Catherine was a godsend, taking over most of the shop work and checking on Natalie daily. But as the months progressed and Natalie began to show, the difficulties eased somewhat. She regained her energy and her appetite, and Vincent watched in awe as her body changed to accommodate their growing child. He would lie with his hand on her swelling belly in the evenings, feeling the baby kick and move, marveling at the miracle of it. They spent hours discussing names, arguing good-naturedly about whether they should choose something traditional or more unusual. They prepared their tiny apartment as best they could, clearing out a corner of their bedroom to make space for a cradle that Vincent built with his own hands. It was rough work, not nearly as fine as furniture from a proper craftsman, but made with love. Natalie went into labor on a hot September afternoon. Vincent had just arrived home from the warehouse when she grabbed his arm, her face pale and tight with pain. "It is time," she said simply. The next 12 hours were the longest of Vincent's life. Catherine came immediately and took charge, sending Vincent to fetch the midwife she had already arranged for. The midwife was a capable Chinese woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered hundreds of babies in San Francisco. She examined Natalie, declared everything to be progressing normally, and settled in to wait. Vincent felt completely useless. The women would not let him in the bedroom except to bring water or clean cloths. He paced the main room of their apartment, listening to Natalie's cries of pain and feeling helpless. Catherine came out periodically to update him, assuring him that everything was fine, that this was all normal, but Vincent could not shake his worry. Finally, in the dark hours just before dawn, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. Vincent's knees almost buckled with relief. Catherine emerged a few minutes later, her face exhausted but wreathed in smiles. "You have a son," she said, "a healthy baby boy. And Natalie is doing well, tired but well. Come and meet your child." Vincent entered the bedroom on shaky legs. The room smelled of sweat and blood and something else, something primal and ancient. Natalie lay propped up in bed, her hair damp with perspiration, her face drawn with exhaustion. And in her arms, wrapped in a blanket Catherine had made, was a tiny red-faced baby. "Vincent," Natalie said softly, looking up at him with more love in her eyes than he thought humanly possible. "Come meet your son." Vincent approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe too hard. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. His son. He had a son. The baby was tiny and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and impossibly small fingers that waved in the air. "He is beautiful," Vincent whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He is perfect." "You are perfect." He leaned over and kissed Natalie's forehead. "Thank you. Thank you for this, for him, for everything." "What should we name him?" Natalie asked, adjusting the blanket so Vincent could see his son's face better. They had discussed many names but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son for the first time, Vincent knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said, "after my grandfather. He was the only member of my family who ever believed I would make something of myself. I would like our son to carry his name." "Thomas Quinn," Natalie said, testing the sound of it. She smiled. "I like it. It is strong. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." The baby made a small sound, something between a gurgle and a coo, and both parents laughed through their tears. Life with a new baby was exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Thomas was a good baby overall, but he still woke several times a night to feed, leaving both Vincent and Natalie perpetually tired. Vincent continued working at the warehouse, though he begged his boss for more regular hours so he could be home to help Natalie as much as possible. Catherine was an enormous help, coming by daily to check on them and often bringing meals she had prepared. She loved her grandnephew fiercely, holding him whenever she got the chance and making him tiny clothes that were far finer than anything Vincent and Natalie could have afforded. "He looks like you," Catherine told Vincent one day as she held the sleeping baby. "Around the eyes and the chin. But he has Natalie's mouth, I think." Vincent studied his son, trying to see what Catherine saw. Mostly, he just saw a baby, though he supposed there was something of both of them in the tiny face. What mattered more to him was that Thomas was healthy and seemed content, that he was growing and developing the way the midwife said he should. As Thomas grew from a newborn into an infant, Vincent and Natalie settled into their new roles as parents. They learned to function on minimal sleep, to communicate in exhausted shorthand, to find joy in the smallest milestones. Thomas's first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over on his own, each moment was a revelation, a piece of proof that they were doing something right. Natalie eventually returned to working in the shop, though only part-time. Catherine was happy to adjust their arrangement, understanding that Natalie's priorities had shifted. They worked out a schedule where Natalie came in a few hours each day, often bringing Thomas with her. The customers loved having a baby in the shop, cooing over him and sometimes even ordering christening gowns or baby clothes. By Thomas's first birthday, Vincent had saved enough to put a down payment on a larger apartment, this one with an extra bedroom. It was still modest by most standards, but to them, it felt like a palace. They celebrated Thomas's birthday there with a small party, inviting Catherine and a few of the friends they had made in the city. Thomas, oblivious to the significance of the occasion, mostly just wanted to grab at the cake. "Look at him," Natalie said that night after everyone had gone home and Thomas was asleep in his new room. "Look at what we made, Vincent. A whole little person with his own personality and preferences and ways of being in the world. It is miraculous." Vincent pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "We have done pretty well for two people who left Texas with nothing but hope and determination." "We have," Natalie agreed. "Sometimes I think about that day in El Paso when I told you I was leaving. I was so scared, Vincent. I had no idea if I was making the right choice, if I would be able to handle it. And then you said you were coming with me, and everything changed." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent said firmly. They stood together in their apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside and the soft breathing of their son in the next room. It was not the life either of them had imagined back in Texas, but it was better. It was theirs. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic toddler who kept them both busy. Vincent continued to advance at the warehouse, eventually becoming the day supervisor with a salary that allowed them to live comfortably if not lavishly. Natalie became increasingly skilled as a seamstress, taking on more and more of the shop's complex commissions as Catherine slowly began to step back. When Thomas was 3, Natalie discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, arriving so fast that she was almost delivered before the midwife arrived. They named her Caroline after Catherine, and their aunt cried when they told her. Caroline was different from Thomas from the very beginning. Where he had been calm and observant, she was loud and demanding. She knew what she wanted and was not shy about expressing it. Vincent and Natalie learned quickly that their daughter would not be ignored, and they loved her fiercely for it. "She is going to run the world someday," Vincent said one evening, watching Caroline scream at her older brother for taking a toy she wanted. Thomas, confused and a little scared of his baby sister's intensity, handed it over immediately. "Oh, definitely," Natalie agreed, scooping up Caroline and comforting her. "God help any man who tries to tell her no." With 2 children, their apartment felt smaller again, but they made it work. Thomas and Caroline shared the second bedroom, though Caroline spent most nights in her cradle beside Vincent and Natalie's bed anyway. Money was tighter with 4 mouths to feed and bodies to clothe, but they managed. The shop was doing well, and Vincent's salary kept increasing as he proved his worth to the warehouse owner. When Thomas was 6 and Caroline 3, Catherine made an announcement that changed everything. She wanted to retire fully from the shop and give it to Natalie to run. "I am getting older," she said over dinner one Sunday. "My eyes are not what they were, and my hands hurt more than they used to. But more than that, I am ready to rest. I have been working since I was 15 years old, and I think I have earned some time to just exist without the constant pressure of running a business." "But Aunt Catherine, I cannot afford to buy the shop from you," Natalie protested. "I am not asking you to buy it," Catherine said firmly. "I am giving it to you. You have worked beside me for 8 years now, made it as much yours as mine. The customers love you, and you have a better eye for design than I ever did. The shop should be yours." There were tears and protests, and long discussions about fairness and Catherine's security. But eventually, they worked out an arrangement. The shop would transfer to Natalie's name, but Catherine would keep the apartment above it and receive a small percentage of the profits to supplement her savings. It was generous almost to the point of foolishness, but Catherine would not be moved. "Family takes care of family," she said simply. That is all there is to it. Taking over the shop completely was both thrilling and terrifying for Natalie. She immediately changed the name to Crawford and Quinn Dressmakers, insisting that Vincent was part of this too, even if he did not so. Vincent did contribute in other ways, handling the bookkeeping in the evenings and helping with heavy lifting or deliveries when needed. Under Natalie's full management, the shop flourished. She had a gift for understanding what women wanted before they quite knew themselves, and word of mouth brought more and more customers. She hired 2 assistants, young women who needed work and were eager to learn the trade. The shop became known as one of the finest in San Francisco for women's clothing. Not the most expensive or exclusive, but reliable, beautiful, and fairly priced. The additional income allowed Vincent and Natalie to finally buy a small house on the outskirts of the city. It was modest, just 3 bedrooms and a tiny yard, but it was theirs completely. No landlord, no rent, just a place they owned outright. Thomas and Caroline each got their own rooms, and Vincent built a small workshop in the shed out back where he could do carpentry projects in his spare time. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. Vincent worked at the warehouse, Natalie ran the shop, and together they raised their children and built the kind of home neither of them had known growing up. They had friends, people from the neighborhood and their respective workplaces who came over for dinners or helped out when times were tough. They were part of a community in a way that felt solid and real. As Thomas grew older, he showed an interest in his father's work, asking endless questions about ships and cargo and how the warehouse operated. Vincent started bringing him along sometimes on Saturdays, teaching him about honest work and the value of a job well done. Caroline, meanwhile, was clearly her mother's daughter. She loved fabric and color, and by the time she was 5, she was already sketching designs for dresses and begging Natalie to teach her to sew. One evening, when Thomas was 12 and Caroline 9, the family sat together in their small parlor. Vincent was reading the newspaper, Natalie was mending a shirt, and the children were playing a game of checkers that Caroline was very clearly winning. It was an utterly ordinary moment, nothing special or remarkable about it, and yet Vincent felt a wave of contentment so powerful it almost took his breath away. This, he thought, was what he had been looking for his entire life without knowing it. Not wealth or fame or grand adventure, but this, a warm home, A woman he loved beyond measure, healthy children, meaningful work. The simple everyday miracle of a life built with intention and love. "What are you thinking about?" Natalie asked, noticing his expression. Vincent set down the newspaper and smiled at her. "Just how lucky I am. How lucky we are." Natalie returned his smile, the kind of smile that had whole conversations embedded in it after 17 years together. "I was thinking the same thing earlier. Remember when we first arrived in San Francisco? How terrified we were that it would not work out." "I remember," Vincent said. "Seems silly now, doesn't it, being scared when we had each other?" "Not silly," Natalie corrected gently. "Human." "But you were right about what you said back then, that first day we met Aunt Catherine, about people needing someone by their side. That made all the difference." The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas grew into a capable young man, serious and hardworking like his father. He started working at the warehouse as soon as he was old enough, and it was clear he had a head for the business. Caroline, true to her early promise, became an accomplished seamstress and designer. By the time she was 16, she was creating original designs that customers specifically requested. Vincent's hair started to gray at the temples, then across his whole head. Natalie found her first gray hair and pretended to be upset while secretly not minding at all. They had earned these signs of aging, had lived full lives that were reflected in their faces and bodies. Catherine, now in her 70s, spent most of her time in her apartment above the shop, content to watch the bustle of the business below without having to be part of it. When Thomas was 20 and announced he wanted to marry a young woman he had been courting, Vincent felt the strange dual sensation of pride and the passage of time. His son, his little boy, was a man now with his own dreams and plans. The wedding was small but lovely, and Vincent cried shamelessly when Thomas and his bride exchanged vows, remembering his own wedding and how young and hopeful he and Natalie had been. Caroline married 3 years later to a young architect she met when he came into the shop to commission a dress for his mother. The architect, a quiet man named Peter, was perfect for her, steady enough to ground her intensity but imaginative enough to appreciate it. Their wedding was larger than Thomas's, reflecting Caroline's larger-than-life personality, and it was held at the church where Vincent and Natalie had married decades earlier. As their children married and started families of their own, Vincent and Natalie found themselves gradually stepping back from their working lives. Vincent retired from the warehouse at 60, having spent over 30 years there. The current owner threw him a party, and dozens of men who had worked under him came to pay their respects. Natalie transitioned the shop to Caroline's management, though she still came in a few days a week to help with complex projects. Retirement suited them both. They had worked hard for 40 years, building their life piece by piece, and now they finally had time to simply enjoy it. They took walks through the city, amazed at how much it had changed since they first arrived. The chaos and rawness of the 1870s had given way to an organized, modern city with electric lights and cable cars. The gold rush days were firmly in the past, replaced by legitimate businesses and established families. They became grandparents multiple times over. Thomas and his wife had 3 children. Caroline and Peter had 2. The house that had once seemed spacious when it was just the 4 of them now felt wonderfully crowded whenever the whole family gathered for Sunday dinners or holidays. Vincent loved being a grandfather, loved the freedom to be playful and indulgent in ways he had not always felt he could be as a father. Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, having lived long enough to see Natalie's success and meet all of her great-great-nieces and nephews. Her funeral was well attended, a testament to the life she had built and the people she had helped over the years. Natalie grieved deeply, but was comforted by the knowledge that Catherine had lived a full life on her own terms and had been loved until the end. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Vincent and Natalie returned to the place where they had first seen the ocean, the hill outside San Francisco, where they had paused before entering the city for the first time. They were both older now, moving more slowly, but their hands fit together the same way they always had. 40 years, Natalie said, looking out at the view. Vincent, we have been married for 40 years. Where did the time go? Into living, Vincent said. Into building something worth having. Natalie leaned against him, and they stood there remembering. The journey west, young and scared and hopeful. Their arrival in this city that had seemed so overwhelming. The wedding, the babies, the hard years and the good ones. The slow accumulation of days that had somehow added up to a lifetime. Do you remember what you said to me? Natalie asked. That day in El Paso when I told you I was leaving, you said then I am coming with you wherever that may be. I remember, Vincent said. That was the moment, Natalie said softly. The moment everything changed. The moment I knew I was not alone anymore, that whatever came next, we would face it together. Vincent turned to look at his wife, this woman who had been his partner, his friend, his love for over 40 years. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but she was still beautiful to him. She would always be beautiful. I would do it all again, he said. Every mile, every hardship, every moment. I would choose you every single time. Natalie smiled, the same smile that had captivated him decades ago in El Paso. And I would choose you. I did choose you, and it was the best decision I ever made. They kissed there on the hill, two old people who had loved each other through everything life could throw at them. The city sprawled below them, full of their children and grandchildren, full of the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. Eventually, they made their way back down to the city, walking slowly, still holding hands. There was dinner to prepare, grandchildren coming by later. Life continued its steady forward motion, and they moved with it, together as they had always been. Years later, when people asked Vincent about his life, about how he had ended up in San Francisco and built such a full and rich existence, he always told them the same thing. It started with a brave woman who decided to take a chance on something better, and a fool cowboy who loved her enough to follow. Everything else, all the good things that came after, flowed from that one decision to face the unknown together rather than alone. He and Natalie lived well into their 80s, healthy and active longer than many people were. They saw the turn of the century together, marveling at the new technologies and ways of life that seemed to arrive faster with each passing year. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start having children of their own, ensuring that the family they had started would continue into the future. When Natalie's health began to fail, Vincent was by her side constantly, just as he had been for over 50 years. He held her hand through doctor's visits and bad days, brought her tea and read to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself. Their children and grandchildren visited constantly, filling their small house with love and laughter, even as they all knew what was coming. Natalie passed away peacefully on a spring morning with Vincent beside her and sunlight streaming through the window. Her last words were, "Thank you for coming with me," and Vincent had smiled through his tears and told her it had been his honor. Vincent lived another 2 years after Natalie's death, quieter years but not unhappy ones. He spent time with his family, worked on small projects in his workshop, and often sat in the parlor looking at the photographs that documented their life together. Sometimes people pitied him for being alone, but Vincent never felt alone. Natalie was still with him in every memory, every object in their home, every choice they had made together that had shaped the world around him. When his own time came, Vincent died at home, surrounded by his children and several grandchildren. His last coherent thought was of a dusty saloon in El Paso, a beautiful woman telling him she was leaving, and the impulsive certainty with which he had said, "Then I am coming with you." It had been the right choice. After everything, knowing what he knew now, it had absolutely been the right choice. The family buried him beside Natalie in the cemetery overlooking the bay. At the funeral, Thomas stood up to speak about his father, his voice steady despite his grief. "My father," he said, "was not a complicated man. He wanted simple things: honest work, a woman he loved, a family to care for. But he wanted them with his whole heart, and he fought for them every day of his life. He taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make over and over, in big moments and small ones. He taught us that wherever you go, whatever you do, it is better when you have someone by your side who really sees you." After the funeral, the family gathered at the house that Vincent and Natalie had bought so many years ago. They told stories, laughed and cried, and celebrated 2 lives well lived. Caroline found the old tin box where her parents had saved their first earnings in San Francisco, now empty, but kept all these years as a memento. Inside, she discovered a piece of paper she had never seen before. It was a letter in Vincent's handwriting, dated just a few weeks before Natalie died. Caroline read it aloud to her brother and their families, her voice shaking with emotion. "To whoever finds this," it read, "if you are reading this, then Natalie and I are both gone and our story has reached its end. I wanted to write this down while I still could, to make sure someone knew how it all began. In 1876, a brave woman named Natalie Crawford told me she was leaving El Paso, Texas for San Francisco. I told her I was coming with her, wherever that may be. That decision, made in a moment, shaped every good thing that happened after. We traveled across the country together, built a life from nothing, raised children who made us proud, and loved each other through all of it. I do not know what happens after death, but I hope it means I get to see her again. And if I do, the first thing I will tell her is the same thing I told her every day we had together. Choosing you was choosing my whole life, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Love each other. Stand by each other. That is the only wisdom I have to offer. Vincent Quinn." There was not a dry eye in the room when Caroline finished reading. They passed the letter around, each person reading it again for themselves, and understanding more fully the love story that had created their family. In the years that followed, as new generations were born and raised, the story of Vincent and Natalie became a family legend. Children heard about the great-great-grandparents who had traveled across the country together, building something beautiful from nothing but love and determination. The dress shop continued operating, now run by Caroline's daughter, and it still bore the name Crawford and Quinn after all these years. The house where Vincent and Natalie had raised their family stayed in the family as well, passed down through the generations, renovated and updated but still standing as a monument to the life they had built. In the small workshop out back, some descendant or another was always tinkering with some project, carrying on Vincent's love of working with his hands. Their story became a touchstone, something the family returned to in difficult times as a reminder of what was possible when people loved each other enough to be brave. It proved that where you started did not matter nearly as much as who you chose to walk beside as you moved forward. It showed that the best things in life were often built slowly, over years and decades, through countless small acts of love and devotion. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when they leave the earth, Vincent Quinn walked hand in hand with Natalie Quinn, forever young, forever traveling toward the horizon together, wherever that may be.